right, some breaking news to get to here on this Tuesday evening. It is January 7th. You're watching the San Francisco 49ers Report. Chase Sr. hanging out here with you. And for the second straight night, Kyle Shanahan and the 49ers have fired a coordinator on the Niners coaching staff. Last night, San Francisco fired special teams coordinator Brian Schneider. We talked about that. And tonight, Kyle Shanahan making the decision to move on from defensive coordinator Nick Sorensen. We're talking about that here on the show. I have a lot of thoughts about this, and this is why you subscribe to the channel, because when breaking news happens, regardless of where I am, I'm bringing you the latest right here on the show. So Matt Mayoko, NBC Sports Bay Area, breaking the news just moments ago, saying this on X, that Nick Sorensen will not return as 49ers defensive coordinator. A league source said the hope is that the 49ers can retain him on Kyle Shanahan's staff. There are a few attractive options for the 49ers to now consider for the defensive coordinator role. And these are two moves, firing Brian Schneider, firing Nick Sorensen, that I had talked about after the Niners got boat raced in Week 18 against the Arizona Cardinals. Another embarrassing defeat. They finished the year 6-11 after entering the 2024 campaign as Super Bowl favorites. And it was so disappointing all across the board for a plethora of reasons. And really, everybody is to blame. The roster was not talented enough or deep enough. That's on John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan. The coaching staff didn't coach well enough. That's on Kyle Shanahan, Brian Schneider, Nick Sorensen, and some of the other positional coaches. There were a lot of injuries that took place for this Niners team. That's on the strength and conditioning program. There were star players who didn't play well, and they struggled. And that was a big reason why the Niners had this massive step back after coming so close to winning the Super Bowl against the Kansas City Chiefs back in February at Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas. But going into this offseason, I talked about this during my perfect 49ers offseason plan. Fire Brian Schneider. You've been awful on special teams the last couple of years, dead last in expected points added here in 2024, and you are not good enough on the defensive side of the ball. And with the final two losses of the year, when you gave up 40-plus points, Nick Sorensen in those two games, and really for the majority of the season, looked to be in over his skis. And it's always a little bit risky when you have a team with Super Bowl aspirations and you go with a first-time coordinator who has no defensive coordinator experience at all. Now, credit to Kyle Shanahan for reaching out to Bill Belichick and trying to gauge his interest. Bill Belichick didn't want to be a coordinator. But then the Niners were left scrambling a little bit. He tried to poach Steve Spagnuolo away from the Chiefs as his contract had expired. He was interested in hiring Jeff Ulbrich, who was the Jets defensive coordinator, and then took over for Robert Saleh this year once Saleh got canned. But then the alternative plan coming off a Super Bowl defeat was to hire Nick Sorensen, and then you brought in Brandon Staley, and the coaching staff was outclassed in many games against some premier offensive minds across the sport. And this 49ers defense in 2024 didn't confuse opposing offenses at all. For the opposing offense, things were just way too easy. I don't think that Nick Sorensen did anything creative, out of the box, exotic. There were constant scheme and communication breakdowns. This was an awful tackling unit. They were undisciplined. They committed a bunch of penalties, and there was a lack of player development. And the Niners this year on defense finished 29th in points per game given up at 25.6. They only averaged 22.9, so that's an issue. They were 8th in yards per game, but who cares about yards per game when you're giving up nearly 26 points per outing? That's 29th in the league. You were 7th in yards per play. Again, it doesn't matter to me because you're 24th on third downs and you're 31st in the red zone. There was a moment between that Packers and Bills game where the opposition entered the red zone 11 straight times and scored a touchdown. Just can't happen. And so this is a move that Kyle Shanahan needed to make, and moves with Sorensen and Schneider to just change things up a little bit, to have a little bit of an organizational reset. And I've talked about this a lot. I don't think that San Francisco has to rebuild. I think they need to get healthy. They need to retool. They need to reset. And this is a team that all year didn't have confidence. They didn't have swagger. They didn't have health. They looked spiritless. And when you make some staff changes to the coaching staff and you make some roster moves, and I expect San Francisco to do that as well, you reset a little bit and you inject some energy and some new juice into your organization. Niners EPA rankings this year. It wasn't all bad offensively. They were 11th. They ended up improving in the red zone late in the year, but Kyle Shanahan didn't have a good year. No question about that. But defensively, EPA 26th. And special teams, 32nd. Now, I'm not always into analytics, but those analytics are pretty telling. The offense was average to good, the defense was bad, and the special teams was worse. And I just think when you watch these Nick Sorensen called games and this Nick Sorensen defense, no creativity, nothing exotic. You weren't really forcing the offense to think. And you gave up so many explosive plays. And I think about instances like having a special teamer in George Odom matched up in the slot against Minnesota against Justin Jefferson. Can't happen. I think about a 4th down from the 4-yard line when it's 4th and goal and you're playing soft zone coverage against the Detroit Lions. Cannot happen. And you saw the inexperience for Nick Sorensen all year. Seems like a great guy. Seems like a nice dude. Nick Bosa said nice guy, but I don't make that decision as far as bringing him back. Fred Warner said we didn't do him any favors. But this is the right choice by head coach Kyle Shanahan. And there are a lot of defensive coordinator candidates who could be attracted to Shanahan, John Lynch, and this entire organization. And we'll get to some of those candidates here in a moment. And I have some more thoughts, but I do want to tell you about our friends at Game Time, the sponsor for tonight's 49ers Report. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Right now, when you download the app, you create an account, and you use the code CHATSPORTS, CHATSPORTS, you get $20 off. Terms apply. First purchase only. I know the Niners aren't making it into the playoffs, but if you want to go to an NFL playoff game, atmospheres are always incredible. And I love how on the app you can see the view from your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time and download the app, create that account, use that code CHATSPORTS for $20 off. Terms apply. First purchase only. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Game Time Picks is awesome. Curation makes it easier to sort through thousands of tickets and just find the seats that are right for you. And it's not just an app for concerts, comedy shows, theater events, and sports. It's all that and a whole lot more. So I'll put that link down below in the show notes and attached to the pinned comment here on this edition of the 49ers Report. So you think about some of the candidates who San Francisco and Kyle Shanahan could hire here. You know, at the top of my list is Robert Saleh. He is going to interview with the Jacksonville Jaguars, where he was an assistant a few years ago, and we'll see if he gets that job after getting fired by the New York Jets. But he's in the running to take over for Doug Peterson there in Jacksonville, and he has familiarity, obviously, with this organization. He was a great defensive coordinator for this team. His body of work, that's what led him to becoming the head coach of the New York Jets. And while with the Jets, their defense was still really good. They never got the quarterback right. And so wins and losses weren't there. But the Jets defense under Robert Saleh, first in points per drive, first in EPA per play, and third in success rate. That's the type of coach that you want to bring in. And it gives you a top defensive mind. It gives you leadership and much-needed energy on the sideline because Kyle Shanahan isn't that rah-rah guy. Robert Saleh has shown that he can maximize players. He streamlines player development. And you're going to have scheme continuity if you want to continue to run the wide nine. You have Gus Bradley, who was the original defensive coordinator under Pete Carroll, the Legion of Boom days with Seattle. The Niners run a lot of those similar defensive concepts. You have a guy like Dennis Allen out there who always put together great game plans to confuse Tom Brady while with the New Orleans Saints under Sean Payton. And so there are a lot of names out there who San Francisco could hire. You could revisit Jeff Ulbrich, although that Jets defense, when he was the interim coach, was not good. And that tells me that Robert Saleh was a part of those defensive game plans. And, with Sorensen, you just saw the difference between a guy who is new to this thing and a guy like Ben Johnson, who's the best offensive play caller and play designer in the game right now. And 2 weeks ago, Niners-Lions, the Lions didn't punt all night. Nick Sorensen had no answers. And then Drew Petzing, who is the Cardinals' offensive coordinator, he's starting to get some head coaching interviews in this cycle. Sorensen got fleeced by him in Week 18. Of course, you have to add that not having Trey Greenlaw, Talanoa Hufanga, Nick Bosa, Javon Hargrave, all of those players out for stretches, that's difficult. But coaches need to be able to maximize players. And I think back to what Robert Saleh was able to do in 2020. Coming off that Super Bowl loss to Kansas City in 2019, San Francisco had so many injuries. They were depleted on the defensive side of the ball. Yet they were still statistically a pretty good defensive unit. And Robert Saleh was still able to get that Jets job with what he did during his entire body of work with San Francisco. And in 2020, good coaches put their players in a position to succeed, and they maximize players. And Nick Sorensen simply didn't do that. Not a lot of continuity with Kyle Shanahan's staff either over the last few years. You go from Robert Saleh, who left after 2020, to D'Amico Ryans, who was the DC 2021-2022, Steve Wilkes last year, and then Nick Sorensen here in 2024. So wanted to hop on the mic, give you some breaking news here. Late, I'm sick, getting through it. Hope everybody out there is having a great start to your new year. I like what Kyle Shanahan is doing so far to start this offseason. These are things that needed to be done, not easy decisions to be made, but give Kyle Shanahan credit because he examined this roster, he examined this staff, and he knew we got to make some changes. Another reminder, subscribe to the channel. Be back tomorrow with some Niners content, hopefully feeling a little bit better, but if not, still going to pump out some videos. And don't forget to hit that sub button.